When I was 18, I saved a strange man. He was very poor, yet he was willing to spend all his money buying me the newest phone. He even said that in the future, he would earn money and support me. But one day, he left without a word. After he became successful and famous, whenever he appeared in the public eye, it was with countless scandals. Later, I got a boyfriend. He treated me very well and brought me to a dinner with his old friends. Unfortunately, the two of them happened to be best friends. I raised my glass to him. His eyes were deep, carrying doubt. Have we met before? I shook my head and smiled lightly. No, you must be mistaken. Chapter 01. In the second year of my relationship with Ethan, he brought me back to Rongcheng to attend a dinner with his old friends. The atmosphere was very harmonious. Someone had drunk too much and suddenly said, at a quick glance, sis-in-law and Ava really do look a little alike. The sis-in-law he was talking about was me. Ava was Luis's female companion, an actress. Everyone then looked back and forth between the two of us. Luis pinched Ava's face. His slightly upturned seductive eyes always seemed to hold affection, and he looked as if he were smiling but not quite. Where do they look alike? Why can't I see it? Their expressions. Maybe. Look. They look quite similar when they smile. Amid the chatter, Luis observed for a moment, then slowly said, their eyes. Now that you mention it, they do look a bit alike. Then someone started making a fuss, saying this was fate, and told me to go toast Luis and Ava. Ethan held me around the shoulders and coaxed me softly. Let's go toast Luis. Luis spends most of the year in Beijing. Since you want to develop your career there, it'll be convenient to ask him for help if anything comes up. Ethan's brothers were all either rich or powerful, but if one had to say who had the most influence, it was still Luis. His family had been rooted in Beijing for many years. They had connections in every industry, and with his help, anything would be much easier. Ethan knew that I was not skilled at socializing at drinking tables, so he patiently explained the reasoning to me. I also listened, picked up a glass of wine, and went to toast Luis. Luis put out the cigarette in his hand. One arm was around Ava, and the other held a wine glass. His deep eyes carried doubt. Miss, have we met before? Even Ethan found it surprising. I smiled lightly and shook my head. No, you must be mistaken. Luis drank the wine and said nothing more. Ava clung to him and whispered ambiguously to him. Ethan tactfully pulled me away. All night, I did not reveal any unusual emotion, but when I saw Luis walking intimately out of the private room with his female companion, I still froze for a brief moment. Actually, Luis was right. We did know each other. We had known each other 8 years ago, but back then, he was not like this. Chapter 02. That night, Ethan drank too much. His whole body leaned against me, and he called me wife with satisfaction again and again. His friends could not pry him off even when they tried. The others were helpless. This is the first time I've seen Ethan like this. Even when he dated his first love before, I never saw him this clingy. Sis-in-law, we've all drunk too much and can't drive. I'll call a designated driver for you. I nodded. Thanks. But before the designated driver could be called, a black Rolls-Royce slowly drove over from the distance. Luis was sitting in the passenger seat, but Ava was nowhere to be seen. Luis waved his hand. No need to trouble yourselves. I'll have the driver take you home. Get in. His friend helped carry Ethan into the back seat, and I also got into the car. Ethan was still holding my arm, unwilling to let go for even a moment. Thank you, Mr. Luis. Luis gave a light, neither heavy nor gentle. The car drove into the thick darkness of the night. Ethan rested his head on my lap, sniffed my arm, and murmured in his sleep, wife. Roma, you smell so good. In the rearview mirror, the man's brows tightened. His sharp eyes looked over through the mirror, and a trace of confusion and bewilderment flashed through them. Your name is Roma? It's my nickname, I said calmly. His gaze fixed on me for a moment. Seeing that I showed not the slightest flaw, he finally withdrew his gaze. I used to have a girlfriend. Her name was Roma too. His tone was very calm and indifferent. The car happened to turn around a large bend. At that exact instant, for some unknown reason, my heart suddenly ached for no reason. Chapter 03. Roma. That was my former name. The year I met Luis, I was 18 and had just become an adult. Luis always loved calling Roma by my ear, again and again. At that time, he was only 20. His eyes were clear, his features sharp and handsome, and when he smiled, he was like the spring breeze and the warm sun in winter. My mother always said that Luis was the best-looking boy in town. I found him by the roadside. He had been in a car accident. The hit-and-run driver had long since disappeared, leaving him lying alone at the scene of the accident. It was a cold late autumn day. On my way home from school, I suddenly heard a faint movement coming from the grass by the roadside. I leaned over to look and saw Luis collapsed beside the field ridge, covered in blood and badly injured. I called for help and sent him to the hospital. My mother paid the medical fees in advance. We originally thought we would be able to contact his family, but unexpectedly, Luis had nothing on him that could prove his identity. My family was truly not wealthy. My mother supported the two of us by making clothes in a factory. That medical bill was a huge sum for our family, and my mother truly did not have the money to pay anymore. Originally, we planned to quietly leave, but when we turned around, Luis had gauze wrapped around his head, his watery eyes open, sitting obediently on the chair and looking at us. He really looked pitiful, like an abandoned puppy. My mother's heart softened for a moment, and she brought him home. Luis was an orphan. According to him, he had been on his way to the city to work when he was hit by a car. We went to the police station to report the case. But at that time, surveillance cameras had not yet fully spread throughout the small town, so they could not find the person. With his injuries not yet healed, he moved into my home. My mother was a kind woman, but I was not. I did not give Luis, this uninvited guest, any pleasant expression. He was a burden, dragging my mother down. Luis sensed my emotions and said nothing. When my mother went to work and I went to school, he silently supported his injured body and did housework. When I returned home, Luis had already made dinner. Though it tasted bad, my mother felt a little embarrassed, but I was very calm about it. After dinner, Luis consciously went to wash the dishes, and I did not stop him either. I turned around, rode my bicycle back to school, and went to evening self-study. Later, one day, I discovered that the old broken sofa at home had disappeared. In its place was a comfortable, soft cotton sofa. My mother smiled and said, "Luis bought it." Luis? Where did he get the money? Luis seemed to understand what I was thinking and said, "I saw a tutoring job advertisement posted on the wall downstairs, so I called them. They wanted me." I knew about that advertisement, but the location was in the city. Going there and back from our home took 3 hours. I looked at Luis. Luis smiled. That day, I began to know that Luis had very good grades. But because he had no money, he could only be forced to give up the college entrance exam and enter society early. This was the story he told me. Chapter 04. I am a rather practical person. I did not have much talent for studying, yet I insisted on getting into a good university so that I could find a good job and give my mother a good life in the future. This small town was very poor and very remote. The school I attended was also extremely ordinary. Its educational resources were weak, and being able to get into an undergraduate program was already considered very impressive. So when Luis looked at my math test paper and easily solved the final major question, I was exceptionally honest and asked him to tutor me. The school's evening self-study ended at 9:30. I was a day student. By the time I rode my bicycle home, it was probably around 10. And then Luis would tutor me for another hour. When a person is determined to do something, their energy becomes especially focused. On the way home, all that played in my earphones were English vocabulary words, and all that I silently recited in my heart were the knowledge points I had learned. One night, I was riding my bicycle. Because I was too focused, I did not notice a stone ahead and crashed straight into it. The bicycle rushed off the road. After a violent flip, I was in so much pain that I could not move. At that time, all was silent. There was no sound around me. I called for help in a hoarse voice, but no one knew. I did not have a phone, only an MP4 player that could not make calls. When people fall into desperate situations, they burst out with powerful willpower. I gritted my teeth, endured the pain, and used all my strength to crawl back onto the road. Limping, I planned to walk home just like that. As I walked, Luis appeared with a flashlight. "Roma, You're hurt. He carried me on his back. His movements were very gentle, and his voice held heartache. Does it hurt? I gritted my teeth and shook my head, but when I thought that I was on his back and he could not see me, I said firmly, it doesn't hurt. Roma, tears are not that precious. Don't be stingy with yourself. Luis's back was broad, making people feel very secure. I lay on his back, and before I knew it, tears streamed down my face. Actually, it really did hurt quite a lot. After that day, every time evening self-study ended, Luis would stand at the school gate to pick me up. Even now, I still remember the slightly youthful Luis from back then, standing obediently under the street lamp, his eyes fixed on the students leaving evening study. His gaze skipped over many people, then those eyes caught sight of me. Slowly, a warm smile rippled through them, like a drop of water falling into a pond, stirring up circles of ripples. That was the first heartbeat of my girlhood. Chapter 05. One day after I was injured from the fall, Luis used the money he earned from tutoring to buy me a phone, the newest model from a certain fruit-branded company. A neighbor said she had seen Luis working at a construction site several times. The sun was scorching, and his clothes were soaked through. But Luis did not tell me anything. He only smiled and handed me the phone, saying that he was worried I would have no way to contact anyone if I had an accident again in the future. I held the phone, and my eyes grew a little wet. 1 month before the college entrance exam, the results of the final mock exam came out. I ranked 5th in the grade, although, in our school, this score only meant that I could get into an undergraduate program. That day, sitting on the back seat of the bicycle, Luis asked me, Roma, where do you want to go to university? Somewhere local, I guess. I want to stay closer to my mother. Have you never thought about Beijing? It's too far, and the universities there have such high score requirements. I won't be able to get in. Roma, go to Beijing. I'll go with you. I laughed. What use would it be for you to go with me? I study while you work. Luis's voice that day carried an especially calm steadiness. You study. I'll earn money to support you. We'll bring Auntie over too, and we'll stay with you together. Okay, you said it. Don't go back on your word. At that time, I only thought Luis was daydreaming. He was still relying on my family to support him. So how could he support me? So I never thought that when Luis said he would support me. Perhaps it was true, but I suppose even he himself did not expect that later on he would break his promise. Chapter 06. After the dinner in Rongqing ended, I was about to return to Beijing. I was preparing to shoot a documentary and was currently recruiting a team. Ethan's parents missed him and wanted him to stay longer. He also wanted me to take the opportunity to meet his parents, but I refused. I could not explain the reason. Among the rich second-generation heirs I had come into contact with, Ethan was a very pure person. He was devoted and faithful. Once he had decided on someone, he would not easily let go. He had expressed many times that he wanted to marry me. To be honest, I had once felt longing in my heart too, but when it touched the reality of family background and social status, reason would always firmly pull those thoughts back. Roma, don't work so hard. Since we have resources, we should use them. Ethan sent me to the airport. On the way, he pointed at a billboard and said to me, Look at Sabrina. She used to have no fame at all. After she met Luis, all kinds of endorsements and roles came to her. On the huge billboard, the big star Sabrina was endorsing a watch. Her face was painted with elegant makeup, and she looked extremely graceful. Speaking of it, it's quite a coincidence. Do you know, Roma? Sabrina is actually her stage name. When she first debuted, her name was very plain, and her clothes were plain too. Only her face was pretty, but Luis liked her. Back then, everyone called her Roma. Ethan hugged me and kissed my face. It sounds so nice, doesn't it? I just love your nickname, Roma. Roma. I leaned in his arms and said nothing. Over these years, Luis had appeared frequently in the public eye. Aside from business news, there were endless entertainment scandals. This influencer, that actress, too many to count. When he was spending lavishly at nightclubs, I was working at a boutique, earning 12 yuan an hour for living expenses. Thinking of the scenes from when we once lived under the same roof, when he and I laughed, quarreled, and teased each other. It really felt like a dream. Actually, we were originally two people on parallel lines who had nothing to do with each other. The film and television resources of Luis's family are very powerful. I'll talk to him. You can just go directly to him. Roma, listen to me, okay? Ethan lowered his head and looked at me, his eyes full of tenderness. I was a very stubborn person. Whenever I encountered difficulties, I never wanted Ethan to interfere. I always wanted to rely on myself, thinking, what if? What if I really could make it on my own? Ethan earnestly advised me that people had to recognize reality, since some roads did not have to be walked in such a winding way. Why make oneself suffer unnecessary hardship? I thought what he said made sense. Okay, I smiled. I'll listen to you. I'll go find him. Chapter 07. Ethan sent me Luis's contact information. After arriving in Beijing, I went directly to Luis's office to find him. Luis's company was very large. When I waited for him, there was a beautiful girl lowering her head and crying, looking so pitiful that anyone would feel sorry for her. Luis held a handkerchief and wiped her tears. His movements were very gentle, but his expression showed impatience. I stood in the distance and tactfully did not go forward. Because of Ethan, I had also learned about Luis's experiences over the years. Luis's mother had died early. He was the only son in the family. One day 8 years ago, he had gone traveling alone, but for no reason. He got into a car accident. That car accident was very likely man-made, because many people searched for Luis, all in vain, and his family even held a grand funeral for him. After Luis survived the catastrophe and returned, he discovered that his father's mistress had brought an illegitimate son into the family. Luis got into a conflict with that illegitimate son and left home in anger, only to encounter a robbery. He was struck on the back of the head with a heavy blow, which happened to hit the back of his skull, and he lost his memory. He forgot some things. Later, relying on the power of his mother's family, Luis took back his right to speak in the family step by step, reaching the position he held today. Things had changed, and people had moved on. Everyone had moved forward. There was no need to bring up old matters again. Over there, Luis's patience was finally exhausted. He had his secretary send the girl away. When he turned around and saw me, a gentle, polite, yet distant smile appeared on his face. I knew that he was only willing to spend time on such a small matter of mine because I was Ethan's girlfriend. A countryside-themed documentary? Yes. Luis's expression was indifferent, while the polite smile remained at the corner of his mouth. Roma, I remember Ethan seemed to mention that your major isn't in this field. Indeed, my college entrance exam results had been average. I went to an ordinary university. The university did not have the directing major I wanted to study, so I studied an ordinary French major. Mr. Luis, I don't think this has anything to do with my major. Luis raised his brows. Roma, I'm just a little curious. Why are you making a documentary? Although the cost is low, the commercial value is low too. For an ordinary person, there really is no need to spend this kind of effort. Mr. Luis, when people are alive, aside from surviving, there is always something they want to express. When people are alive, they always have ideals. Luis chuckled softly. After a moment of silence, he said, with Ethan, you don't have any pressure to survive, so you certainly can afford to be willful. There was undisguised mockery in his tone. When one is under someone else's roof, one has to lower one's head. I had come to ask him for help, so hearing a few sarcastic remarks did not count for much. Luis was straightforward too. He invested money in me and also formed a team. When I left his office, I had just stepped into the elevator when Luis also walked in. The atmosphere was silent. At that exact moment, my mother called. Roma, Mom doesn't understand the documentary you're talking about. Don't push yourself too hard. If you can't find people, worst comes to worst, Mom will help you. My mother had always called me by my nickname, Roma. She said that just hearing it made her feel this girl would surely live a life as sweet as honey. Very happy. My mother was always like this, very positive and very optimistic. I smiled. Mom, who said I couldn't find people? I'll be able to start work soon. Is Ethan helping you? I nodded and glanced at Luis from the corner of my eye. His friend. Ethan is such a good child. He even bought me a massage chair 2 days ago. The camera flipped around and swept past the TV cabinet. On the TV cabinet stood a photo of 3 people. It was a photo of my mother, Louise, and me before the college entrance exam. My mother treasured it and had never thrown it away. I had put it away in the cabinet several times, but after I left, my mother would take it out again. She had always believed that Louise was a good child, even though all these years, he had never come back to find us. With that fleeting glimpse, Louise's pupils suddenly contracted sharply. Roma, look, your auntie sat in it and said it was unbelievably comfortable. My mother's face was full of pride. The elevator doors opened. I smiled and stepped out, only for a hand to suddenly grip my wrist tightly and pull me forcefully backward. Louise, who had just looked indifferent, now showed an extremely complicated emotion on his face. Shock, pain, remorse, confusion. He looked at me, his eyes bloodshot, and the words seemed to jump out of his throat one by one. Roma, we have met. It was a certain tone. Chapter 08. I had always remembered that the day Louise left was a clear, sunny day. Gossip news was playing on the television, saying something about an illegitimate son from a wealthy family in Beijing entering the household. Louise glanced at it casually. Before he left home that day, his expression was calm. He touched my head and said to me gently, Roma, a friend of mine found me a job in Beijing. They're in a hurry to interview me, so I'll go there first. Wait for me. I'll definitely come back before your college entrance exam. His tone was so certain, and his gaze was so firm, as if he really was only going on a short trip and would come back. I believed him. In the beginning, for those 2 years, I truly waited for Louise. I waited until the college entrance exam ended, waited until summer vacation passed, and the long winter passed too. My heart began to panic. Then, finally, one day, I saw a familiar face on television. Charming, handsome, and cold-hearted. It was very hard to connect that person with Louise. The person on the screen came from a prestigious family and held power in his hands. How could he have anything to do with Louise, who had claimed to be an orphan? Yet they happened to be the same person. After that, I learned all news about him from television. He had new lovers, spent lavishly, became successful in his career, was admired by countless people. The intersection between us was separated by a small screen. So close, yet so far. I admit it, I had indeed liked Louise. He was handsome, treated me well, and was smart. I had simply fallen for him. But that passionate, surging love from my girlhood, after day of waiting, finally met complete disappointment and turned into a lifeless pool of stagnant water. My feelings were worn away by exhausting part-time jobs and complicated studies. Day after day, I was too tired. I no longer had any extra emotion to invest in another person. At this moment, Louise, who had remembered everything, forcibly pulled me back into his office. He was digesting those memories that were both extremely strange and familiar to him. His gaze was mournful as he looked at me, and tears unknowingly spilled from his eyes. He pressed his palms against his eyes, as if he did not dare meet my gaze. In pain, he asked me, Roma, why didn't you come look for me all these years? Louise, I did look for you. He slowly raised his head. I said calmly, it's just that I really could not find you. There had once been a period when I frantically searched for news about him online and asked around about his whereabouts. I was unwilling to accept it. Truly unwilling. I really wanted to question him face to face. He had clearly promised to come back. So why had he left without a word? But in the end, I could only accept my fate and discover that, actually, I simply could not find him. He appeared in places I could see, seemingly within reach. Yet in reality, there was a natural chasm between us. We were completely people from 2 different worlds. Roma, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to truly leave. Is that so? But so what? I smiled lightly. Mr. Louise, don't bring up the past anymore. You've lived very happily all these years too, haven't you? Mr. Louise? Louise chewed over this form of address and smiled sarcastically. I stood up, planning to leave, but Louise grabbed my wrist. Roma, can we still go back to the past? He looked at me eagerly. His humble gaze carried a trace of hope. Give me one chance, Roma. I shook my head. Mr. Luis. My boyfriend is Ethan. He is your good brother. Chapter 09. In the days that followed, the documentary team and I filmed in a small mountain village in Rongqing. The documentary we were filming this time focused on elderly people left behind in rural areas, telling the story of this group of elderly people in the countryside who had no source of income. Many people knew of this group, but very few cameras paid attention to them. Our team stayed at a farmer's home and recorded the daily lives of the elderly people in the village. Ethan found an excuse, took the chance to get away from his parents, and came to the countryside to accompany me. When I was busy, he was very sensible and did not disturb me. When help was needed, he was especially proactive. Once, after my colleague and I had just finished interviewing an elderly person and came out of the home, it was already getting late. Ethan was covered in sweat. When I asked, I learned that he had helped the family chop firewood, climbing up and down the mountain, tiring himself out for an entire day. I felt a little sorry for him. He lifted his face and smiled at me. Roma, those grandparents really work so hard. At night, Ethan held me and said, Roma, if you hadn't done this project, I really wouldn't have seen such an overlooked group of people. Film it well. I'll definitely promote it for you. Ethan was different after all. I turned over. Ethan kissed my forehead and asked softly, after this is done, shall we get married? I did not answer immediately, but in that second, for the first time, the thought of crossing the barrier of family background and spending my life with him appeared in my heart. Ethan, let me think about it. His voice was gentle, and his tone carried joy. You said you'll think about it, at least this time. You didn't reject me directly. Roma, we still have a chance, don't we? Do we? Maybe. Ethan practically stayed in the countryside. The elderly woman who owned the house where we were staying looked at Ethan and me for a long while, then said with a puzzled yet certain expression, You keep saying you're not married, but you two got married long ago, didn't you? Ethan was extremely happy. Grandma, do we look like husband and wife? What look? It was a strange yet familiar voice. On the downhill road, Luis stood with a smile at the corners of his lips and a faint expression on his face. Luis, why are you here? I came to visit the set. How rare. This is the first time I've seen you actually have the patience to visit a set. And in such a remote place too. Luis, look, don't Roma and I look like husband and wife? Luis fixed his gaze on Ethan and me for 2 seconds, then shook his head. No. Chapter 10. Not long after Luis arrived, Ethan was called back home by a phone call from his family. Luis changed lodging with my colleague and stayed in the room next to mine. Every day when I got up to work, he followed too, under the name of visiting the set. When there was free time, he looked at my manuscript and asked with great interest, Roma, you said before that you wanted to make documentaries. I still remember how high-spirited you looked back then. When I was 18, Luis and I walked through the village where my grandmother lived. The village was very desolate. There were not many young people, only old people and children, giving it a lifeless appearance. What left a deep impression on me was that there was an old woman living with her granddaughter. She was very old, sick, and had no source of income. Her son had abandoned them in the countryside and never asked about them, while he built a new family in the city, with both a son and a daughter. That scene was truly sad. Before we left, Luis secretly placed 200 yuan on the table. I lived in a very poor place where everything was behind. The economy was behind, and education was behind. Making documentaries was not suitable for a poor person like me. Actually, what Luis said that day was partly right. If I had not met Ethan, I probably still would not have enough money to support this idea now. Mr. Luis, you're blocking the light. Luis froze, then moved aside. The sunlight shone over. I nodded to him in thanks. Thank you. Chapter 11. After being apart from Ethan for a few days, he asked me to go into the city to find him. One night after filming ended, I drove back to the city and went to a house under Ethan's name. I had not told him in advance. I wanted to give him a surprise. I opened the door. In the entryway, there was a pair of thin high heels. They were not mine. I froze for 2 seconds, then slowly walked inside. There was the sound of water from the bathroom, accompanied by a woman's voice. When I got closer, I heard her calling, "Ethan, Ethan, hand me a bath towel." My footsteps stopped. Just at that moment, the door at the entryway opened again. Ethan's laughter came through. "Cecilia, I bought the casserole congee from your favorite place. Do you still remember when we were kids? The two of us liked it most." Before he finished speaking, Ethan saw me. His smile froze on his face. He was extremely flustered, holding the congee in his hand, neither able to lift it nor put it down. The woman in the bathroom grew annoyed and poked her head out. Her delicate, innocent face was flushed with moisture. "Ethan, I called you for ages and you didn't answer. Hurry and hand me a bath towel. I don't want to use yours." The woman finally noticed me. Her pretty brows lifted. "Oh, you're Ethan's girlfriend, right? Don't misunderstand. He and I have been friends for over 20 years. We grew up together naked as kids. We're more innocent than anyone." Ethan naturally took out a new bath towel and handed it over. His expression had eased quite a bit by now. He walked over, hugged me, and explained, "Roma, I told you before. This is Cecilia. We're as close as siblings." Cecilia came out wrapped in the bath towel. Her wet hair lay over her shoulders, and she walked very naturally into Ethan's bedroom. "Yes, I know." I looked into Ethan's eyes, and the anger I felt was actually very faint. "She's also your first love." Ethan panicked. "She only came back to the country for a few days. My parents have always treated her like a daughter. Since it's so rare for us to get together after so many years, they wanted me to show her around properly." "Roma, don't overthink it." I nodded. "I won't overthink it. I'm hungry too. Is there enough to eat?" "Enough. Of course there's enough." Ethan opened the congee and took a bowl from the kitchen to serve me a portion. "Careful. It's hot." Cecilia changed into Ethan's pajamas and teased him. "Wow, you really do care about your girlfriend." Ethan glared at her. She stuck out her tongue, choosing love over friendship. "I guess I'll have to do it myself." I ate the congee, unmoved by the excessively intimate behavior between the two of them. How strange. I actually did not feel intense anger. That night, Ethan remained uneasy and cautious the whole time, like a husband caught red-handed by his wife. I had originally planned to stay over, but I suddenly lost interest. Ethan wanted to send me back to the countryside, but I refused. Before I left, he was still explaining. Nothing really happened between Cecilia and me. "Roma, Ethan." I looked into his eyes. "In a scene like this, do you want me to be angry? Or do you want me to be so magnanimous that I don't care at all?" Ethan's lips moved slightly. They trembled a little, and a trace of sadness appeared in his eyes. After a moment, he said, "Roma, I would rather you scold me." Chapter 12. When I returned to the countryside, it was already very late. There was still a small light bulb glowing in the courtyard. Luis was sitting on a small stool. I greeted him briefly, then went to wash up. After washing up, just as I was about to enter my room, Luis was standing at the door, as if he had been waiting for a long time. Under the dim light, he said quietly, "Roma, break up with him, marry me." Chapter 13. When Luis looked seriously at a woman, his eyes were filled with affection and sincerity. It truly could make one's heart move and thoughts grow chaotic for a moment. If I had been in my early 20s, these words from him would have made my heart surge and moved me deeply. But I was already 26. I was no longer a young girl who had just entered society. That little bit of liking I once had for him had long been worn away by the long passage of time. "Luis, what do you take me for?" He stepped on the cigarette butt on the ground and said, "Roma, I'm sincere. In the past, we actually liked each other. Give us both a chance. Break up with Ethan and be with you. Do you know how other people would look at me?" Luis's expression changed slightly. He smiled faintly. "After we get married, no one will dare say anything about you. Roma, you don't have to worry about anything. I'll bear everything." 8 years had indeed changed many things. When 20-year-old Luis was in front of my mother and me, he was always very humble. He would consider my safety and go to school every night to pick me up. He would also fear that my classmates might misunderstand and think I was dating too early. So he publicly claimed that we were relatives, and that he was one of my older brothers. At that time, he would not have forced me like this. Or perhaps, He had never changed. Perhaps this was the real him. Luis, you were gone for 8 years. With your ability, if you were determined to investigate the information about your disappearance that year, it would have been impossible for you not to find any trace at all. But you didn't. Doesn't that mean that, in your subconscious, that memory was not as important as you imagined? It's not like that, Roma. Luis explained calmly and steadily. My family situation is very complicated. My mother died very early, and my father had another family outside with his mistress. Since I was young, I was very lonely. I have always treasured the days I spent with you and Auntie. I even didn't want to leave. I deliberately stayed with you both. Later, something happened. At that time, I thought I would come back to find you after I handled my family matters. That was true. But an accident happened. My father was unwilling to let me know about that experience, and my uncles were also unwilling to let me know about our past connection. Everyone said that I had only stayed in the hospital for over half a year and finally woken up. All these years, there has always been a blurry figure in my mind. I did date many girlfriends. I thought they were the person in my memories, but in the end, I found that they were not. This person had a similar name. That person had a similar voice. And a third person had similar eyes. I was searching for someone, but even I didn't know who I was searching for. After Luis finished saying all this, his deep eyes stared straight at me, filled with sincerity. I lowered my eyes, controlling the chaotic emotions in my heart, and smiled. You searched for me in every person? Are you acting out a replacement romance trope? Luis, this is the deep affection you believe in. But that doesn't mean I have to accept it. When you were with those women, you also received happiness, and you must have given them feelings too. Roma, our past was beautiful. What past? I asked him word by word. Between us, aside from the relationship of savior and rescued, what past do we have? It was not some especially remarkable love, and we are no longer teenage children. How much of that vague affection from 8 years ago is left now? No matter how beautiful the past was, it was still only the past. Luis, neither of us should live in memories. Luis stood blankly under the light, his eyes misted over with tears and sorrow that could not melt away. I did not look back, nor did I listen to him ask me to stay. I locked the door. Chapter 14. That night, my thoughts were thrown into chaos by 2 men. I thought for a very long time and sorted out my feelings. By the time the sky faintly brightened, I already had a decision in my heart. Luis stubbornly stayed in the countryside and refused to leave, no matter how careless Ethan was. He finally realized that Luis's attitude toward me was unusual. The conflict between the 2 men erupted, and they got into a fight in the fields. Both of them were injured, covered in mud, and the way they looked at each other did not resemble good brothers at all. Very soon, this little anecdote spread throughout the village and became the talk of the villagers after meals. I had them compensate the farmers whose crops had been damaged, then called Ethan aside to talk alone. Ethan's face was red and swollen. He said, feeling wronged, Roma, it hurts so much. He really hit hard. He did look rather pitiful like that. I went to several households and finally borrowed some ice from a small shop to apply to his face. Ethan was still complaining. A friend's wife is off limits. He's used to being a playboy, and now he has less and less bottom line. Roma, don't be deceived by him. That man has no sincerity. I quietly listened to him. Only after Ethan talked himself tired did I say, Ethan, let's break up. Chapter 15. The man opposite me turned pale with shock. Why? Roma, I believe that in the 2 years we've been together, apart from that time when Cecilia returned to the country and I didn't tell you, because I was afraid you would misunderstand and thought it would be better if you didn't know, I have never wronged you. Auntie's health isn't good. Sometimes when you're busy with work, I make time to take her to the hospital for checkups. You don't like socializing, and I was afraid you would misunderstand. So I also started attending fewer gatherings with my friends. Yes, that was also because I wanted to cling to you. You wanted to make a documentary, so I asked Luis for help. By the end, Ethan was already choking up. During the time I dated him, he had indeed been a good partner who made me feel at ease. My mother was satisfied with him. My friends were satisfied with him too, and I seemed unable to find any fault with him either. My first meeting with Ethan was full of drama. At that time, I had already graduated and was working as a translator at a company. One time, I worked overtime until very late. The subway had stopped, and the buses had stopped too. I called a car through a ride-hailing app. While waiting for the car, I saw a child picking through trash. Deep into the night, he was still rummaging through a trash can by the road, his clothes ragged and torn. I bought a rice ball and milk from a convenience store and placed them in his hands. After taking them, the child ran away timidly. The car I got into was a luxury car. It was Ethan's. Yes, he was a rich second-generation heir with too much free time. Driving for a ride-hailing app late at night out of boredom, Ethan noticed me because of that gesture. Later, we ran into each other again at a mall, and he began pursuing me. I was very self-aware. I was an especially ordinary person. If nothing unexpected happened in this life, I would never have known someone like Ethan. At first, I rejected Ethan. I said, "You only think it's fresh. It's your first time meeting a girl like me." Actually, if you were an ordinary man, you would discover that I am only an ordinary woman too. Ethan opened his bright, sparkling eyes and smiled as he said to me, "Roma, everyone in this world is ordinary. We are born, grow old, get sick, die, and eventually leave. But in the script of my life, you will always be a special existence." Perhaps because no one had ever said words like that to me before, and I had never received such intense and direct pursuit. In the end, I fell. Our beginning lacked a little mutual understanding and shared affection. Because of Luis, Ethan's expression became stained with humiliation and sorrow. Tears rolled from Ethan's eyes. He wiped them casually, looking extremely aggrieved. "Ethan, the problem is mine," I slowly said. "That day, your first love appeared in your home in such an ambiguous scene. As your girlfriend, I should have been quite angry, but you should still remember that I was not very angry. I was not even furious. I was extremely rational. I could actually sit down calmly and eat with you, and I believed that the two of you were open and innocent. That Cecilia had merely taken a shower in your house. I did not overthink, did not grow suspicious, did not imagine things. That itself was a problem. My problem was that I did not like Ethan that much. For one instant, I thought perhaps we could keep going forever. But after that day, I thought about it and realized that actually, we can't. In this relationship, if we speak from an emotional level, you have given more, while I have not. That is unfair to you. If we keep going, how far would we go? Ethan, would we really reach the point of discussing marriage? If I hold on to the belief that my feelings are equal to yours, or even that I stand in a higher position, once it comes down to reality, how could the two of us, and our two families, ever be equal? You also have a childhood sweetheart first love. Right now, I can ignore it. But what about the future? Will I care then? Will you get angry because I don't care? Will she become a thorn between us? Ethan fell silent. Actually, there was another reason. I was not as devoted to this relationship as I had imagined. After reuniting with Luis, my emotions had once fluctuated because of him. I had liked someone before, so I clearly knew what kind of feeling it was when I wholeheartedly liked a person. A short pain is better than a long one. Ethan, let's end here. Chapter 16. After we broke up, Ethan completely disappeared from my world, and I was busy editing the documentary, submitting it for review, entering it into exhibitions, promoting it. I was like a spinning top, unbearably busy. When our mutual friends learned that Ethan and I had broken up, they were all shocked and surprised. Everyone had thought that, under Ethan's long companionship, I would eventually soften and break through the restraints of class with him, then spend the rest of our lives together. I did not have the energy to explain to each of them one by one. When someone asked, I simply said, our personalities weren't compatible. Our team's documentary was shortlisted for several film festivals and won an award at a small one. After it went online, the film and television company under Luis's name spent a lot of money promoting it. Hard work did not betray those who cared. It sparked a fair amount of discussion online. More and more people began paying attention to this group. Luis established a charity fund specifically to help elderly people left behind in rural villages. As for the discussion around the documentary itself, there were both good and bad comments. Some people said the subject was very good, but the director's ability was still somewhat lacking. Otherwise, this subject could have been filmed with more depth. I quietly read those comments and thought that some of them actually made sense. I was not a professional in this area. I needed further study. Luis approached me from time to time under the excuse of repaying a debt of gratitude. He always said, "Roma, you and Auntie saved me that year. I still haven't repaid that kindness." On my birthday, he held a luxurious birthday party for me. Everyone who attended was spreading rumors that Luis and I had an extraordinary relationship. After the party ended, Luis gave me a music box. When you were 18, you wanted one very much. A late gift. Roma, I hope you like it. The small DIY music box required a lot of time to assemble. I stared at that music box in a daze. Before I knew it, Luis had moved closer. Seeing me smile, he also smiled and said, "Roma, when you're happy, I'm happy." But I suddenly asked him, "Luis, what is my name now?" He froze. Then he answered, "Regina." I nodded. Right. I now use my mother's surname, and I am no longer called Roma. Luis's expression was complicated and held confusion. Luis, do you still remember that actually? In the past, I told you I didn't like the name Roma? When I was born, my father discovered that I was a girl and left the hospital without looking back, leaving only my mother and me behind. When my parents held me and went to register me in the household records, my name still had not been decided. My father was very impatient. He saw that a girl next to us was being registered under the name Roma, so he also named me Roma. That father who abandoned his wife and child so early left me nothing except a name. I did not like this name. When I was little, the reason I gave myself was that it was too vulgar and too ordinary. After I grew up, I finally had the courage to face the real reason. I did not like it because this name did not carry even the slightest importance placed on me. Beside me, Luis nodded lightly. You know I don't like it. So why do you still call me Roma? Because you think it sounds nice. So you like calling me that. Regina. In Luis's usually calm eyes, a trace of panic finally began to appear. You always use your actions to express your liking for me, but you never ask whether I truly want it. You don't want it. But then what do you want, Regina? If you don't say it, how would I know? The man's voice carried a plea. Because I don't need you to do anything else for me. Why should I tell you? I looked at the magnificent, glittering hall after the crowd had left, and my heart felt a long-lost sense of peace. I am not good at communicating with others, and I don't like being the center of attention compared with such a grand birthday party. I would rather celebrate with my friends. Luis, I know your fund has a program that sponsors students studying abroad. I have been preparing to study abroad for a very long time, but I am missing a recommendation letter, and I also need funding. Didn't you say you wanted to repay me? Luis, you won't break your promise again, will you? Chapter 17. When I was 28, I received the offer I had dreamed of. I was about to go to my ideal university to study the major I wanted. Before I met Ethan, I had already been preparing for this. I worked desperately, took overtime, and accepted translation jobs in order to earn more money. The plan back then was to achieve it after I turned 30. Because I had to support my family, I had to make sure my mother's life was stable before I could feel at ease pursuing my dream. But my luck was not bad. My goal arrived several years early. The night before I left, my friend and my mother came to see me off. My mother was very reluctant to part with me and shed many tears. During the meal, while my mother went to the restroom, my friend mentioned Ethan's recent situation. Do you know? It seems like he's getting married. His parents are forcing him to marry that childhood sweetheart first love of his, but he refuses and is still making a scene. My friend Anna curled her lips. I guess making a scene won't do much. A rich second-generation heir like Ethan isn't like Luis. It's hard for him to escape his parents' control. I quietly ate and did not respond. Regina, aren't you angry? I shook my head. Angry about what? He's marrying his first love. Then what did the time you two spent together count as? Anna, I'm not angry, I said calmly, because I was the one who gave up on him first. During the time we dated, he did not wrong me. I had no resentment toward him, and no expectations either. That mindset of yours, Regina, The pork tripe chicken here is pretty good. Next time I'll bring Auntie here to eat. She called my name so naturally. For some reason, as I listened, I laughed. Anna frowned. What are you laughing at? Outside the window, a familiar Rolls-Royce had been parked by the roadside for a very long time. I looked at the person in the car from far away and said softly, "You call me Regina. Why is it that some people just can't remember?" It was truly a puzzling question, but there was no need to spend time on them anymore. That Cinderella who had once accidentally entered a luxurious banquet hurriedly left the world that did not belong to her when the midnight bell rang. She picked up her own glass slipper and ran toward the path she had chosen. Life is so long, and the world is so vast. A person's energy can be placed in so many places. I began thinking about how I should adapt to the weather and food of a foreign country. I also worried a little about whether language would become an obstacle. But then I thought, none of that mattered much. In the past, when I was about to graduate, my mother fell ill and needed a lot of money. I was still carrying student loans, borrowing money from relatives while working part-time. I did not even know how I had managed to get through it back then. My mother and I had survived those difficult days. In the future, we would surely overcome every difficulty too. My mother taught me optimism. Her marriage also taught me not to gamble on someone else's vague and illusory love, believing it could give me a stable future. The only person I could rely on would always be myself. My destiny had to be held firmly in my own hands, no matter whether the road ahead was winding and painful or smooth and successful. This was the decision I had made myself. I did not regret it. I hoped that I could hold on to my original belief and use my camera to focus on those forgotten groups in society. At that time, I would do better than the current me, and I also firmly believed that I would definitely be able to do it.